She looked at the girl's faded hoodie, then at her first-class ticket, and laughed. "We don't let people like you sit up front," the flight attendant sneered, ripping the boarding pass into confetti right in the girl's face. The gate went silent. Security was called. But what the attendant didn't know was that the girl wasn't just a passenger. She was texting her father, the man whose name was painted on the side of the jet. In 10 minutes, this flight attendant wouldn't just lose her job. She was about to face a courtroom nightmare she never saw coming. Stick around. You need to see exactly how this instant karma hits. The noise inside JFK's Terminal 4 was deafening, a cacophony of rolling suitcases, crying infants, and the robotic drone of announcements over the PA system. But at Gate 42, the atmosphere was icy cold, and the temperature was being controlled entirely by one woman, Beatrice Vance. Beatrice was the lead flight attendant for Sovereign Air, the airline that prided itself on being the gold standard of the skies. At 45, with hair sprayed into a helmet of blonde perfection and a uniform that was tailored a little too tightly, Beatrice didn't just serve passengers, she judged them. To her, the cabin wasn't a mode of transport, it was her personal kingdom, and she was the queen who decided who was worthy of entry. "Step back, please. Zone 1 only," Beatrice snapped, holding up a manicured hand to stop an elderly man in a wheelchair. "But miss, my ticket says priority," the man stammered, holding up a crumpled piece of paper. "It says priority access, not God status." Beatrice rolled her eyes, pointing to the side. "Wait until I call your row. If you block the lane again, I'll have you checked." Her colleague, a younger, nervous attendant named Sarah Jenkins, whispered, "Beatrice, he's 80. We can just let him through." "Sarah, look at me," Beatrice hissed, turning her back to the passengers. "If you let the riffraff think they own the place, they'll treat us like servants. You have to assert dominance. That's how you survive in this industry. Look at them." She gestured vaguely at the economy passengers lining up. "Cattle. They are just cattle." Beatrice checked her watch. It was a flight to London, Sovereign Air's flagship route. The passenger list was full of VIPs, tech moguls, and old money. She smoothed her scarf, preparing her fake smile for the first-class passengers approaching the podium. That was when she saw her. Walking toward the first-class lane was a young black woman, no older than 22. She was dressed in oversized grey sweatpants, battered Converse sneakers, and a vintage hoodie that looked like it had been washed 100 times. She had a messy bun and large headphones around her neck. She carried a beaten-up duffel bag that looked like it belonged in a gym locker, not a transatlantic flight. Beatrice's lip curled. This was exactly the kind of visual pollution she hated on her flights. The girl, whose name was Alia, walked up to the podium with a calm demeanor. She didn't look up from her phone as she placed her boarding pass on the scanner. Beatrice's hand shot out, covering the scanner before the laser could read the code. "Excuse me," Beatrice said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that barely masked the venom underneath. "You're in the wrong line, sweetie. Economy boarding is at the rear, Zone 5. Alia looked up. Her eyes were tired, dark circles prominent under the terminal lights. She had been studying for her law school finals for 3 days straight and just wanted to sleep. "No, I'm in the right place. Seat 1A. Beatrice let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. She looked around at the other passengers, businessmen in three-piece suits and women carrying Louis Vuitton bags, inviting them to share in the joke. 1A, Beatrice repeated loudly. 1A is the Sovereign Suite. It costs $12,000 for a one-way trip. Are you telling me that you... She gestured up and down at Alia's sweatpants. Paid $12,000 to sit there? I didn't pay for it, Alia said quietly. It was a gift. A gift, Beatrice scoffed. Right. Listen, I don't have time for scams today. We have actual paying customers waiting. Take your little printed-out fake ticket and go to the back of the line. If there's space in economy after everyone else boards, maybe I'll let you on. Maybe. It's not a fake ticket, Aaliyah said, her voice hardening slightly. Scan it. I will not scan it, Beatrice snapped, her face flushing red. I am the senior pursuer on this vessel, and I have the discretion to deny boarding to anyone who displays suspicious behavior or improper attire. And frankly, you look like you're lost. My attire is not against the policy, Aaliyah stated calmly. It's against my policy, Beatrice hissed. She leaned over the counter, getting in Aaliyah's face. Now move, or I'm calling security. Sarah Jenkins, the junior attendant, stepped forward, looking terrified. Beatrice, maybe just check the name? The manifest says Seat 1A is reserved for a Sterling. Beatrice ignored her. She snatched the boarding pass from Aaliyah's hand. You want me to check it? Beatrice asked. Yes, Aaliyah said. Beatrice looked at the paper. It clearly said, Aaliyah Sterling, Seat 1A. Any other employee might have paused at the last name. Sterling, as in Sovereign Air, a Sterling Enterprise company. But Beatrice was too blinded by her own prejudice and arrogance to connect the dots. To her, Sterling was just a name, and this girl didn't look like money. She looked like someone trying to sneak into a club. This is clearly forged, Beatrice announced. I've seen this scam 12 times. You print a fake pass, try to sneak into the lounge or the suite, and hope we're too busy to notice. It's on my phone app, too, Aaliyah said, reaching for her device. I don't want to see your phone, Beatrice yelled. The terminal had gone quiet. Dozens of people were watching and recording on their smartphones. Beatrice felt the adrenaline of the spotlight. She felt powerful. She held the paper ticket up in the air. This is trash, she said. And then, with a dramatic, deliberate motion, Beatrice ripped the boarding pass down the middle. Then she ripped it again, and again. She threw the confetti-like pieces at Aaliyah's chest. Ticket invalid, Beatrice smirked. Now get out of my airport. Aaliyah stood perfectly still as the pieces of paper fluttered to the dirty carpet of Gate 42. She didn't scream. She didn't lunge. She didn't cry. She just looked at Beatrice. It was a look of profound disappointment, but not the kind Beatrice was used to. Usually, when she crushed someone, they looked scared. Aaliyah didn't look scared. She looked calculating. You shouldn't have done that, Aaliyah said softly. Are you threatening me? Beatrice gasped, putting a hand on her chest. Did you all hear that? She threatened a flight crew member. That's a federal offense. Beatrice grabbed the phone on the podium. Security to Gate 42 immediately. I have a hostile passenger. Potential threat level. Sarah Jenkins was shaking. Beatrice, stop. Please, let me just look her up in the system. Shut up, Sarah, Beatrice barked. You're too soft. This is how you handle liars. Aaliyah bent down and picked up one of the torn pieces of the ticket. She sighed, pulled out her phone, and unlocked it. She didn't open the airline app. She opened her contacts. She scrolled past names that would have made Beatrice faint. Senators, A-list actors, tech CEOs, until she landed on a contact saved simply as Dad. She typed a message. Hey, Dad. At Gate 42, lead attendant Beatrice Vance just ripped up my ticket and denied me boarding. She says I look like trash. She called security on me. Can you handle this? I just want to get to London for the internship. She hit send. 3 dots appeared instantly. Then a reply. Stay there. Don't say a word. I'm in a board meeting upstairs in the administrative tower. I'm coming down. Keep the camera rolling. Aaliyah put her phone in her pocket and crossed her arms. 2 TSA agents and a Port Authority police officer, Officer Miller, arrived on Segway scooters. Officer Miller was a large man who looked like he'd dealt with too many unruly passengers that day. "What's the problem here?" Miller asked, stepping off his scooter. Beatrice immediately put on her victim face. Her voice went up an octave. "Officer, thank God you're here. This individual is refusing to leave the boarding area. She presented a forged ticket, tried to force her way onto the jet bridge, and when I stopped her, she verbally threatened my safety." Officer Miller turned to Alia. He saw a young girl in sweatpants standing alone. "Miss, is this true?" "No," Alia said. "I have a valid ticket. She ripped it up." "She's lying!" Beatrice shouted. "She's aggressive. I want her banned from Sovereign Air permanently. I want her arrested for trespassing." Miller looked at Alia. "Miss, do you have ID?" "I do," Alia said. She reached for her bag. "Watch out! She might have a weapon!" Beatrice shrieked, hiding behind the podium. Officer Miller put a hand on his holster, his eyes narrowing. "Slowly, miss." Alia pulled out her passport and handed it to the officer. Officer Miller opened it. He looked at the photo, then at the name. He paused. He looked at the name again. He looked at Alia. Then he looked at the massive Sovereign Air 747 parked outside the window. The tail of the plane had a logo, a stylized silver S. The name of the airline was Sovereign Air, but the holding company, printed in small letters on every sign in the terminal, was Sterling Aviation Group. Miller looked at the passport. Alia Sterling. "Miss," Officer Miller said, his tone changing from authoritative to confused. "Are you related to Marcus Sterling?" "He's my father," Alia said. Beatrice let out a loud, cackling laugh. "Oh, please. Now she's the owner's daughter? Officer, come on. Look at her. Does she look like a billionaire's daughter? She looks like she sleeps at the bus station. Arrest her for impersonation, too." Miller ignored Beatrice. He handed the passport back to Alia with trembling hands. "Miss Sterling, I apologize. There seems to be a massive misunderstanding." "There is," Alia said, "but it's not yours." "Officer!" Beatrice screamed, slamming her hand on the desk. "Why are you talking to her? Cuff her. I am the senior pursuer, and I am giving you a direct order." Suddenly, the phone at the gate podium rang. It wasn't the normal internal line. It was the red phone, the emergency line that connected directly to the control tower and high-level operations. Beatrice stared at it. She had never heard that phone ring in 20 years of flying. She picked it up, glaring at Alia. "Gate 42, Beatrice speaking. Make it quick. I'm dealing with a security situation." A deep, booming voice came through the receiver. It was a voice Beatrice had heard on training videos and company holiday messages for 2 decades. It was a voice that could freeze water. "This is Marcus Sterling," the voice said. "Do not let that plane depart, and do not let my daughter out of your sight. I am 2 minutes away." Beatrice's face went slack. The blood drained from her cheeks so fast she looked like a wax figure. She dropped the phone. It dangled by the cord, swinging back and forth, hitting the side of the podium with a dull thud. 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 "Who was that?" Sarah Jenkins whispered. Beatrice couldn't speak. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. She looked at Alia, who was just standing there, checking her fingernails, looking bored. The crowd of passengers was murmuring. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Then, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Not just one person, but a phalanx. Turning the corner was a group of 6 men in expensive Italian suits. In the center was Marcus Sterling himself. He was 6'4", a titan of industry, known for his ruthlessness in business and his absolute devotion to his family. He walked with a fury that made people physically step back against the walls to make way. He wasn't looking at the plane. He wasn't looking at the police. His eyes were locked on Beatrice. Beatrice Vance had wanted drama. She had wanted to be the queen of the airport. She was about to get her wish, but she wasn't the queen anymore. She was the peasant who had just slapped the princess. And the king had arrived. The silence that fell over Gate 42 was heavy, the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. The ambient noise of the airport seemed to be sucked away, leaving only the sound of Marcus Sterling's leather shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. He didn't run. Men like Marcus Sterling didn't need to run. He moved with the inevitable momentum of a glacier. His entourage, 2 lawyers, a head of security, and a personal assistant, fanned out, effectively creating a perimeter around the podium. Beatrice Vance, who just moments ago had been posturing like a dictator, shrank back against the wall of the jet bridge door. She tried to summon her usual bluster, the "I'm just following protocol" voice that had saved her 1,000 times before, but her throat felt like it was filled with sand. Marcus stopped 3 feet from the podium. He didn't look at Beatrice yet. He turned to Alia. He didn't hug her. That wasn't the Sterling way in public. He simply looked her over, checking for physical harm. His eyes landed on the torn pieces of paper scattered on the dirty carpet, the confetti of the boarding pass. "Alia," Marcus said, his voice low and controlled. "Are you injured?" "No, sir," Alia replied. She fell back into the formal cadence she used when her father was in CEO mode. "But I have been publicly humiliated, accused of fraud, denied service based on my appearance, and threatened with arrest by your staff." "I see," Marcus said. Finally, he turned to Beatrice. Beatrice forced a smile. It was a ghastly, trembling thing. "Mr. Sterling. What an honor. I didn't know you were at JFK today. If I had known—" "If you had known," Marcus interrupted, his voice booming enough that passengers 10 gates away stopped to listen, "that she was my daughter, you would have treated her with respect. Is that what you were about to say?" "No, yes. Beatrice stammered, sweat beading on her forehead, melting her heavy foundation. "Sir, you have to understand. Security protocols are strict. This passenger, she refused to comply. She looked suspicious. She had a hoodie. She didn't fit the profile of a first-class passenger. I was protecting the brand." Marcus stepped closer. He towered over her. "Protecting the brand?" Marcus repeated softly. "Miss Vance, look at the side of that plane. What does it say?" "Sovereign air," she whispered. "And who defines the values of sovereign air?" "You do, sir. And my values," Marcus said, his voice rising, "are that every single person who buys a ticket, whether they are wearing a tuxedo or a trash bag, is a guest in my house. You didn't protect my brand, Miss Vance. You set it on fire." Marcus pointed a finger at Sarah Jenkins, the junior attendant who was cowering near the computer. "You. What is your name?" Sarah, sir. Sarah Jenkins," the young woman squeaked. "Sarah, tell me exactly what happened. And know that there are cameras recording everything. So if you lie to cover for your supervisor, you will be terminated alongside her." Sarah looked at Beatrice, who was giving her a desperate, pleading look. Then she looked at the billionaire who signed her paychecks. "Beatrice ripped up the ticket immediately," Sarah said, her voice shaking but clear. The passenger, Ms. Sterling, was polite. She tried to show her app. Beatrice refused to look. She called her riff-raff and mocked her clothes. I tried to tell her to check the manifest, but she wouldn't listen. "Traitor!" Beatrice hissed at Sarah. "You little snake!" "That is enough!" Marcus roared. The sound was so loud that the PA system seemed to whine in feedback. Marcus turned back to Beatrice. You ripped up a valid boarding pass? It looked fake, Beatrice cried. Pick it up, Marcus commanded. Beatrice blinked. Excuse me? Pick it up. Marcus pointed to the floor. You threw it at her like garbage. Now, you will get on your knees and pick up every single piece of that boarding pass. The crowd gasped. Several passengers had their phones out, live streaming the event. The chat rooms on TikTok and Instagram were already exploding. Resto Sovereignaire was trending within seconds. Beatrice Vance was a proud woman. She wore Chanel knockoffs and drove a leased Mercedes to pretend she was wealthy. The idea of kneeling on the public floor in her uniform was abhorrent to her. Mr. Sterling, I can't. I am a senior pursuer. You are currently nothing, Marcus said coldly. You have 10 seconds to pick up that ticket, or my security team will escort you out of this building, and I will personally ensure you never work in aviation again. Not even flying a drone. Beatrice looked at the crowd. She saw hundreds of eyes judging her. She saw the sneer on the faces of the people she had been rude to earlier. Slowly, painfully, Beatrice Vance sank to her knees. Her tight skirt strained as she lowered herself to the dirty grey carpet. She reached out with her manicured red claws and began picking up the scraps of paper. Her hands were shaking so badly, she dropped them twice. Aaliyah watched from above, her expression unreadable. She didn't gloat. She just watched the karma unfold. When Beatrice had gathered the pile of confetti, she stood up, her face burning with a humiliation deeper than she had ever inflicted on anyone else. She held the scraps out to Marcus. Marcus didn't take them. He gestured to Officer Miller. Officer, I'd like to file charges, Marcus said calmly. Beatrice's eyes bulged. Charges? For what? It was a mistake. Destruction of private property, Marcus listed, ticking off fingers. Harassment, defamation of character. And since you interfered with a federal flight crew member, my daughter is a licensed pilot and a board member of this airline, technically crew. Interference with flight operations. Marcus turned to his head of security. Take her badge. Take her uniform jacket. She is not fit to wear the Sterling crest. No, please, Beatrice screamed as the security guard stepped forward. I have a pension. I have 5 years left. You can't do this. You did it to yourself, Aaliyah said. It was the first time she had spoken in minutes. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through Beatrice's sobbing. You judged me because of a hoodie. You thought you had power over me because I looked poor. You didn't care about the rules, Beatrice. You just wanted to be cruel. Marcus turned to the gate agent computer. He typed in an override code that only 3 people in the world possessed. The screen flashed green. Sarah, Marcus said to the junior attendant, you are now the senior pursuer for this flight. Can you handle the crew? Sarah's jaw dropped. Me? Sir, I'm just a junior. You showed integrity, Marcus said. That is the only qualification that matters to me. Get everyone boarded. We are already 10 minutes late. Marcus put a hand on Aaliyah's shoulder. Come with me to the lounge, Aaliyah. We need to discuss the future of our customer service training program. Clearly, we have failed. Wait, Beatrice yelled as Officer Miller took her by the elbow. She was stripped of her blazer, standing in her blouse, looking small and defeated. What about me? What happens to me? Marcus stopped and looked back over his shoulder. You, he said. You're going to be famous, Ms. Vance. The internet is going to love you. Beatrice Vance was escorted out of Terminal 4, not as a queen, but as a prisoner. Officer Miller, who had realized quickly which way the wind was blowing, was not gentle. He marched her past the long line of economy passengers she had sneered at earlier. As she passed, She heard the whispers. "That's her. That's the witch from the gate." "Serve her right. Did you see the video? It's already got 1 million views." Beatrice felt like she was in a nightmare. This couldn't be happening. She was Beatrice Vance. She owned the cabin. She decided who got the extra champagne. She couldn't be fired. They took her to a holding room in the airport's administrative wing, a sterile grey box with a metal table and 3 chairs. She sat there for 2 hours, stewing in a mix of terror and indignation. She kept telling herself that the union would save her. The union always saved her. Then the door opened. It wasn't a union rep. It was a woman in a sharp navy suit, carrying a briefcase that looked like it cost more than Beatrice's car. This was Brian Rigby, no relation to the song, she always clarified, the lead counsel for Sterling Aviation Group. She was known in the legal world as the Shark of Wall Street. Brian didn't sit. She tossed a tablet onto the table in front of Beatrice. "Watch," Brian commanded. Beatrice looked at the screen. It was a TikTok video. The angle was from a passenger sitting nearby. It showed Beatrice's face, in high definition, twisted in a sneer, ripping the ticket and throwing it at Orlia. The caption read, "Flight attendant from Hell bullies owner's daughter." Karma, Glenchasham Sovereign Air. The view count was climbing in real time. 3.4 million views. 3.5 million. "This is taken out of context," Beatrice said automatically. "There is no context that justifies this," Brian said, her voice dry and devoid of sympathy. "I am here to inform you of the company's immediate actions." Brian opened a folder. "First, your employment is terminated effectively immediately for cause. Gross misconduct. Violation of Clause 4.2 of the Employee Handbook. Respect and dignity. Because it is for cause, you forfeit your severance package and your unvested stock options." "You can't take my stock," Beatrice shrieked. "I earned that." "You burned it," Brian corrected. "Second, Sterling Aviation is filing a civil suit against you for reputational damage. Our PR team estimates the negative brand impact of this video at roughly $4 million. We intend to recoup a portion of that from you." Beatrice laughed, a hysterical, high-pitched sound. "I don't have $4 million. I have a condo in Queens and a leased car." "Then we will take the condo," Brian said simply. "And we will garnish your wages from whatever future employment you manage to secure. Which brings me to the third point." Brian slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a notification from the FAA. "Mr. Sterling has already forwarded the incident report to the Federal Aviation Administration. He has flagged you as a security risk due to your erratic behavior and misuse of emergency protocols when you called security on a passive passenger. You are going to be placed on the no-hire list for all major carriers." Beatrice felt the room spin. "So, I can't fly? You can't even work the check-in desk at a regional bus line if we have our say," Brian said. "You are done in this industry, Beatrice." Beatrice put her head in her hands. "Why? Why is he doing this? Because I made a mistake with his daughter? It's nepotism. He's destroying me to protect his spoiled brat." Brian sighed. She tapped the tablet again. The video changed. This time it was a different video. It looked like CCTV footage from inside a boardroom. "You think Aaliyah is a spoiled brat?" Brian asked. "You clearly don't read the internal company newsletters." Beatrice watched the screen. It showed Aaliyah standing at the head of a massive conference table, presenting charts and data to a room full of executives. "Aaliyah Sterling graduated top of her class from Harvard Law," Brian narrated. "She spent the last 3 years working undercover in various departments of this airline, baggage handling, ticket sales, cleaning crew. She did it to understand the business from the ground up." On the screen, Aaliyah was speaking. The audio was faint, but Beatrice could hear it. "We need to stop treating economy passengers like cargo. The data shows that 40% of our first-class customers start in economy. If we treat them like trash when they are poor, they won't fly with us when they are rich." Brian paused the video. "Today wasn't a random trip," Brian revealed. Aaliyah was flying to London to take over as the Vice President of European Operations. She dressed down on purpose. It was a test, Beatrice. A test to see how our best senior pursuer treats someone who looks vulnerable. Beatrice stared at the frozen image of Aaliyah on the screen. The girl she had called Riff-Raff was actually her new boss. The girl she had mocked for wearing sweatpants was the one who had written the new customer service policy Beatrice had refused to read. "I failed," Beatrice whispered. "You didn't just fail," Brian said, snapping her briefcase shut. "You became the example. Mr. Sterling intends to make your firing a case study in our training academy. For the next 50 years, every new flight attendant will watch this video of you and be told, 'Don't be a Beatrice.'" Brian turned to the door. "Officer Miller will escort you to the curb. Do not return to the airport property. Your personal items from your locker will be mailed to you in a box." "Wait!" Beatrice cried out, tears finally streaming down her face, ruining the last of her makeup. "Please, tell Mr. Sterling I'm sorry. Tell Aaliyah I'm sorry." Brian paused at the door. She looked back, her expression cold. "I would," Brian said. "But Aaliyah is currently halfway over the Atlantic, sitting in seat 1A, drinking the champagne you were supposed to serve. She's moving on. I suggest you do the same." The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. Beatrice was left alone in the silence of the room. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She had hundreds of notifications, messages from friends asking if it was true, comments on her Facebook, hate mail. She opened her banking app. She had $4,200 in savings. Her mortgage was due in 3 days. The hard karma wasn't just a slap on the wrist, it was a wrecking ball. And as Beatrice sat there, weeping into her hands, she realized the most painful part of all. She had done this to herself. But the story wasn't over. Because while Beatrice's life was ending, Aaliyah's flight was just beginning. And on that plane, something else was unfolding. Something that would prove Aaliyah wasn't just a daddy's girl, but a force to be reckoned with on her own. The massive engines of the Sovereign Air 747 roared to life, pushing the aircraft through the layer of clouds hanging over New York and into the pristine sunlight of the stratosphere. Inside the cabin, however, the atmosphere was far from sunny. Sarah Jenkins was trying her best, but she was drowning. Being promoted from junior attendant to senior pursuer in the span of 5 minutes was a terrifying leap. She was now in charge of the entire cabin crew, the manifest and the most demanding passengers on the planet, all while her hands were still shaking from the confrontation at the gate. To make matters worse, the crew was 1 person short. With Beatrice fired and escorted off the premises, they were flying with a minimum crew designation. This meant everyone had to work double time. Sarah rushed down the aisle of the first-class cabin with a bottle of Dom Perignon in one hand and a tray of crystal flutes in the other. She was sweating. "You're late," snapped a voice from seat 2B. The voice belonged to Alex Thorne, a hedge fund manager who wore a suit that cost more than Sarah's annual salary. He had been drumming his fingers on the armrest for 10 minutes. "I apologize, Mr. Thorne," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "We had a staffing change right before departure. I appreciate your patience." "I don't pay $20,000 for patience," Alex sneered. He snatched a glass from her tray. "And where is Beatrice? She usually knows how to run this cabin. You look like a deer in headlights." Beatrice is unavailable, Sarah managed to say. Typical, Alex muttered, taking a sip and grimacing. This isn't chilled enough. Unbelievable. Sovereign air is going down the drain. Sarah felt tears pricking her eyes. She retreated to the galley, leaning against the counter to catch her breath. She closed her eyes, trying to stop the panic attack that was clawing at her throat. She wasn't ready for this. Beatrice was cruel, but she was efficient. Sarah felt like an imposter. Suddenly, a soft hand touched her shoulder. Sarah jumped, spinning around. It was Aaliyah Sterling. Aaliyah had shed her oversized hoodie. Underneath, she was wearing a simple, elegant black t-shirt. She had tied her hair back tighter and looked less like a tired student and more like the corporate executive she was about to become. "Ms. Sterling," Sarah gasped. "I'm so sorry. Do you need something? I'll get your meal started right away." "Sarah, stop," Aaliyah said gently. "Breathe." "I can't," Sarah whispered. "Mr. Thorne in 2B is angry. The champagne is warm. We're short-staffed. I'm going to mess this up." Aaliyah stepped into the galley. She didn't look like a passenger anymore. She looked like she owned the place, because, technically, she did. "You aren't going to mess this up," Aaliyah said firmly. "You showed more integrity at the gate than Beatrice showed in 20 years. That's why my father put you in charge. But right now, you need help. And I'm not just a passenger today." Aaliyah reached into the overhead compartment of the galley and pulled out a hidden service apron. She tied it around her waist over her sweatpants. Sarah's eyes went wide. "Miss Sterling, you can't. You're the VP of European Operations. You can't serve drinks." Aaliyah smiled. "Before I was a VP, I was a trainee. I spent 6 months working the London-Dubai route. I know this galley better than you do. We're a team today, Sarah. You handle the manifest and the safety checks. I'll handle Mr. Thorne. But—" "Go," Aaliyah commanded, but with a kindness that made Sarah want to follow her into fire. "Go check on economy. I've got first class." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes, and headed to the back. Aaliyah grabbed a fresh bottle of vintage Krug from the rapid chiller, placed it on a silver tray with a bowl of warm nuts, and walked out into the cabin. She approached seat 2B. Alex Thorne was typing furiously on his laptop, looking like a thundercloud. "Mr. Thorne," Aaliyah said, her voice smooth and confident. "My apologies for the earlier temperature issue. I've brought you the Krug 2008. It's significantly crisper than the Dom." Alex looked up, ready to bark at the flight attendant. He saw Aaliyah. He paused. He looked at her sweatpants, then at the apron, then at her face. "Wait," Alex said, squinting. "I saw you at the gate. You're the girl Beatrice was yelling at. The hood rat." Aaliyah didn't flinch. She poured the champagne with perfect technique, not spilling a drop. "I am the passenger Beatrice had a disagreement with. Yes," Aaliyah said, calmly. "And now you're serving me." Alex laughed, a cruel barking sound. "So she was right? You are staff? Why were you trying to sneak into the suite earlier?" "I'm filling in," Aaliyah said, placing the glass down. "We aim to provide the best service, regardless of our role." Alex took a sip. He couldn't complain about the wine. It was perfect. But he was a man who enjoyed power, and he sensed weakness. "Well, at least you know your place now," Alex smirked. Beatrice was a bit harsh, but she had a point. "You people need to look the part. You look like you should be cleaning the toilets, not pouring vintage champagne." Aaliyah stood up straight. The plane hit a pocket of turbulence, shaking the cabin, but she remained rooted to the spot, perfectly balanced. "Mr. Thorne," Aaliyah said, her voice dropping to a register that was pure steel. "You are a managing partner at Thorne Capital, correct?" Alex blinked, surprised. "Yes. How do you know that?" Because Thorn Capital manages the 401k portfolio for Sovereign Air's union employees, Aaliyah said. My father, Marcus Sterling, mentioned that we were reviewing your contract next month. He's been concerned about the attitude of the leadership at your firm. Alex froze. The glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Your father? Marcus Sterling, Aaliyah repeated. I'm Aaliyah Sterling, the hood rat you just referred to. Alex's face went the color of curdled milk. He looked at the girl in the sweatpants. Then he remembered the news stories about Marcus Sterling's daughter entering the business. I didn't mean, Alex stammered, putting the glass down so hard it nearly cracked. Miss Sterling, I was just making a joke. Banter. You know how it is. I don't find classism to be a joke, Mr. Thorne, Aaliyah said coldly. And neither does the Sterling family. We value respect above all else. Beatrice Vance forgot that today, and she is currently unemployed and facing a lawsuit. I would hate for Thorn Capital to lose their biggest contract because their CEO shares the same flaw. Alex was trembling now. He looked like he wanted to vanish into the upholstery. Please, he whispered. I apologize. Sincerely. Enjoy the flight, Mr. Thorne, Aaliyah said. And please, treat Sarah with respect when she comes back. She's in charge of this vessel. Aaliyah turned and walked away. When Sarah returned to the front 15 minutes later, she found the cabin silent. Mr. Thorne was sitting quietly, reading a magazine, terrified to even ask for a refill. The other passengers were sleeping or watching movies. What did you do? Sarah whispered to Aaliyah, who was untying the apron in the galley. I just handled customer relations, Aaliyah winked. He won't be a problem. For the rest of the 7-hour flight, Aaliyah didn't just sit in her suite. She mentored Sarah. She showed her how to manage the inventory logs on the iPad, how to diffuse tension with body language, and how to mix the signature Sovereign cocktails. By the time the wheels touched the tarmac at Heathrow, Sarah Jenkins wasn't just a nervous fill-in. She was a leader. As the plane taxied to the gate, Aaliyah put her hoodie back on. She picked up her duffel bag. You did good, Sarah, Aaliyah said. Thank you, Miss Sterling, Sarah said, tearing up. You saved me. No, Aaliyah said. You saved yourself when you told the truth back in New York. The truth always pays off. But while truth was paying off for Sarah, a lie was being manufactured back in America. While Aaliyah was in the air, Beatrice Vance was on the warpath. She had spent the first hour after her firing crying. She spent the second hour drinking cheap wine in her living room. By the third hour, desperation had turned into rage. She wasn't going to let them destroy her. She was Beatrice Vance. She had given 20 years to that airline. Her phone rang. It was a producer from the Daily Chat, a trashy but popular daytime talk show that thrived on scandal. Beatrice, the producer said, we saw the video. It's viral. Everyone hates you. But we want to give you a chance to tell your side. Exclusive interview. Tonight. We'll fly you to our studio in Chicago. First class. Well, on another airline. Beatrice didn't hesitate. I'll do it. But I want $50,000. Done, the producer said. Beatrice smiled. 50 grand would cover her legal bills. And once she told the world that Aaliyah had provoked her, that the video was edited, that she was the victim of a billionaire's power trip, the public would turn. Americans loved an underdog. They hated billionaires. She could spin this. 6 hours later, Beatrice sat in a makeup chair in Chicago. The stylists tried to cover the red puffiness around her eyes. She wore a modest cardigan, trying to look like a sympathetic grandmother figure. The show went live. The host, a sharp-tongued woman named Diane, leaned in. Beatrice, The world has seen you ripping up a young girl's ticket. It looks bad. What do you have to say?" Beatrice looked directly into the camera, summoning her best fake tears. "Diane, it was a set-up," Beatrice sobbed. "That girl, Aaliyah, she came to the gate looking for a fight. She was verbally abusive to me. She threatened to have me fired before I even looked at her ticket. The video you saw was edited. It didn't show the part where she spit at me. I was scared. I only ripped the ticket because I thought it was a weapon," the audience in the studio murmured. Beatrice felt a surge of hope. They were buying it. "So you're saying the daughter of Marcus Sterling, the heiress to the company, assaulted you?" Diane asked skeptically. "Yes," Beatrice cried. "She's a spoiled, entitled brat who hates the working class. I am a victim of the elite." Suddenly, the large screen behind Diane flickered. "Hang on," Diane said, touching her earpiece. "I'm getting word. We have breaking news. Sterling Aviation has just released a statement." "And a video?" Beatrice froze. "Apparently," Diane said, looking at the teleprompter, "Sovereign Air has released the full, unedited security footage from Gate 42, including audio from the podium microphone." Beatrice's blood ran cold. The podium microphone. She had forgotten the podium had a continuous recording loop for anti-terrorism purposes. The giant screen lit up. The footage played. It was crystal clear. The world watched as Aaliyah walked up quietly. The world heard Aaliyah say, "I didn't pay for it. It was a gift." The world heard Beatrice laugh and say, "We don't let people like you sit up front." The world heard Beatrice say, "Cattle, they are just cattle." And the world saw clearly that Aaliyah never raised her voice, never threatened, and certainly never spit. The studio audience gasped. Then they started to boo. Diane turned to Beatrice. Her expression had changed from curiosity to disgust. "Beatrice," Diane said, her voice icy, "you just lied to millions of people. You called your passengers cattle? You mocked a girl for her clothes?" I, Beatrice stammered. The sympathetic grandmother mask crumbled. "It's deep fake. It's AI. Marcus Sterling made that up." "It's time for a commercial break," Diane said, disgusted. "Get her off my set." Security guards, much less polite than the ones at the airport, grabbed Beatrice by the arms. As she was dragged off stage, the camera lingered on her face. It was the face of a woman who realized she hadn't just dug her own grave. She had just poured the concrete over it. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Aaliyah was walking through the arrivals hall at Heathrow. A throng of reporters was waiting. Flashbulbs popped like lightning. "Ms. Sterling, Ms. Sterling, did you see Beatrice's interview? Ms. Sterling, is it true you served drinks on the flight? Do you have a comment on the lawsuit?" Aaliyah stopped. She looked at the cameras. She looked tired but strong. She didn't look like a victim. "I have one comment," Aaliyah said into the microphones. The crowd went silent. "Sovereign Air is a family," Aaliyah said clearly. "We don't care where you come from, what you wear, or who your father is. We care about how you treat people. Today, we removed a cancer from that family. And to anyone else who thinks they can judge others based on appearance—" She paused, looking directly into the lens, knowing Beatrice was watching from a dressing room in Chicago. "Remember that the person you're looking down on might be the one signing your paycheck. Be kind. Or be gone." Aaliyah turned and walked toward the black SUV waiting for her. She had a meeting in the morning. She had an airline to run. But the story wasn't quite over. There was one loose end. Beatrice Vance was ruined, yes. But true karma, the kind that hits the soul, was waiting for her when she got back to her empty apartment in Queens. Beatrice Vance returned to New York 3 days after the disastrous talk show interview. She didn't fly. She couldn't. Her name was flagged on every airline database in the country. She had to take a 20-hour Greyhound bus ride from Chicago to Port Authority, sitting next to a man who ate egg salad sandwiches for the entire journey. When she finally dragged her suitcase up the steps to her Queen's apartment building, she felt a flicker of relief. At least she had her sanctuary. At least she could lock the door and hide from the world. But when she reached her door, the key wouldn't turn. There was a heavy padlock on the hasp and a bright orange sticker plastered on the wood at eye level. Notice of foreclosure and eviction. Pursuant to Civil Court Order, Line 2B. Beatrice stared at it, her vision blurring. She pulled out her phone to call her bank, but her service had been cut off. She had to run down to the bodega on the corner to use the Wi-Fi. When she logged into her banking app, the balance read $14,000. Her accounts had been frozen and garnished. The civil suit filed by Sterling Aviation had moved with terrifying speed. Because she had admitted to the behavior on national television by trying to lie about it, the judge had granted an immediate injunction. The shark of Wall Street, Brian Rigby, had been true to her word. Beatrice's assets were seized to pay for the reputational damages and the legal fees. Beatrice sat on a milk crate outside the bodega, watching the rush-hour traffic. She had no job. She had no home. She had no pension. The only thing she had left was the viral fame she had so desperately chased. But it was the kind of fame that made people spit on the sidewalk when they walked past her. The headquarters of Sovereign Air in London was buzzing with activity. It was the launch day of the Open Skies Initiative, a revolutionary program designed to make air travel more accessible and to overhaul the customer service training for the entire industry. Aaliyah Sterling stood at the podium in the main hangar. She looked impeccable in a tailored suit, but she wasn't wearing high heels. She was wearing her signature Converse sneakers. It had become a symbol of her leadership style, grounded, practical, and ready to work. For too long, Aaliyah spoke into the microphone, addressing the hundreds of journalists and employees. This industry has been about exclusion. It has been about velvet ropes and golden tickets. But at Sovereign, we believe that dignity is not an upgrade. It is a standard feature. The crowd applauded. Beside her stood Sarah Jenkins. Sarah had been promoted again. She was now the director of in-flight experience. She wore the uniform with pride, a stark contrast to the terrified girl she had been at JFK that fateful day. We are also announcing, Aaliyah continued, a new scholarship fund. The Vance Grant, named ironically of course, will provide full tuition for underprivileged students to attend our flight academy. We are taking the negativity of the past and turning it into opportunity for the future. Flashbulbs popped. Aaliyah smiled. She had done it. She hadn't just survived the attack. She had used the pieces of that torn ticket to build a stronger foundation for the company. Miles away, in a dingy discount grocery store in New Jersey, a woman named B was scanning items at the checkout counter. Beatrice looked 20 years older. Her blonde hair was graying at the roots, tied back in a messy ponytail. She wore a blue smock that smelled like bleach. "Hurry up, will you?" a customer snapped. It was a young woman in a sharp business suit, talking on a Bluetooth headset. "I have a flight to catch." "I'm going as fast as I can, Mom," Beatrice mumbled, her hands aching from arthritis. "Well, go faster." The woman rolled her eyes. "God, why do they always hire such incompetent people? It's just scanning, it's not rocket science." Beatrice froze. The words echoed in her head. Incompetent. Riffraff. Cattle. She looked up at the woman. For a second, Beatrice wanted to scream. She wanted to say, "Do you know who I am? I used to fly to Paris. I used to drink champagne." But she didn't. She couldn't. She looked at the checkout screen. The woman was buying a travel magazine. On the cover was a glossy photo of Aaliyah Sterling, smiling confidently under the headline, "The New Queen of the Skies." Beatrice stared at the face of the girl she had destroyed herself to mock. A tear leaked out of Beatrice's eye and landed on the conveyor belt. "Are you crying?" the rude customer scoffed. "Seriously? Just bag my stuff." "Yes, ma'am," Beatrice whispered. "Right away, ma'am." She bagged the magazine. She bagged the snacks. She handed the receipt to the woman who treated her like dirt. As the automatic doors slid open and the woman marched out to her taxi, Beatrice Vance stood alone in the fluorescent glare of the discount store. She finally understood. She finally felt the cold, sharp sting of humiliation she had inflicted on so many others. The karma hadn't just hit her wallet. It had put her in the shoes of the people she despised. Beatrice looked down at her blue smock, then back at the empty checkout lane. She picked up a rag and started wiping the counter. "Clean up on aisle 4, the manager's voice boomed over the speaker. "B, move it." "Coming," Beatrice said softly. She walked away from the register, her head bowed, fading into the background. Just another anonymous face in the crowd she used to call cattle. The flight was over, and for Beatrice Vance, the landing was permanent. And that is the story of how one moment of arrogance cost Beatrice Vance everything. She thought her uniform gave her the right to judge others, but she forgot the golden rule of life. You never know who you are talking to. Aaliyah Sterling didn't need a first-class ticket to prove her worth. She carried her value inside her. Beatrice, on the other hand, lost her career, her fortune, and her dignity because she judged a book by its cover. It's a brutal reminder that karma has a way of balancing the scales. Whether you're a CEO or a cashier, kindness is the only currency that really matters. Beatrice learned that lesson the hard way, scanning groceries while the girl she mocked changed the world. What would you have done if you were Aaliyah? Would you have forgiven Beatrice, or did she get exactly what she deserved? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another story of real-life drama and instant justice. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.